New Buddha-ware Dhamma Talks. Jeff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
I wanted to raise the issue of what are the hindrances or obstacles to being compassionate. Compassion is an important teaching of the Buddha. It has central place in the Mahayana, that is the Chinese, Japanese, northern version of Buddhism. It also has a slightly different place in the southern Buddhism of Sri Lanka and Myanmar and Thailand, that is a Theravada. Compassion is not pity, to start with. Pity, if we pity someone, we're kind of putting ourselves separate and above them, like you're the one that's sick, not me. And that's kind of separation, isn't it? Whereas compassion is actually feeling with that person and recognizing that their suffering is my suffering, and if it isn't today, it may be tomorrow, because we're all in the same boat. That's very, very important, to have this sense of human togetherness. You know, that you can't really, you could try, but you can't really separate yourself from others, because your time will come around. So compassion means feeling with, or empathy means feeling in the other person's shoes, because they will be your shoes. Your shoes may be slightly different. They pinch in a different place, but they're still shoes that pinch sooner or later. So that's what we mean by compassion. Why is it important to the Buddha? Is it kind of an add-on extra? No, because it's connected with the whole program of subduing craving. And craving is about self-centeredness and, you know, attaching huge centrality to one's own sense of being, I, me, mine, whereas the Buddha's program is to say that is the source of our problem. We have to kind of at least soften or attenuate this strong sense of identity. So it's about a program of selflessness in which you find greater peace and solidarity with other people and indeed with other creatures. There are those who will say, yes, well, that's all very nice, compassion, I like the idea, when are we going to start trying it? Doesn't seem to be much compassion around. What's going on there? You know, on the one hand, this is very typical of we human beings. On the one hand, we have a sense that something is right and we ought to be doing it. On the other hand, we say, well, we can't really do it. And then that can easily tip into cynicism, that it's impossible to do it, don't even try, that's not the way of the world. Then the other extreme is idealism, where we keep talking about wonderful things like compassion and love and equanimity and so on, but the practice may be something different. So it kind of lives in our head and only, but not in our actual behavior. So somewhere in the middle there has to be some way of not just talking about compassion, but actually doing it. And this is where wisdom comes in, because in the Buddha's teaching, wisdom and compassion go together. Without wisdom, compassion will turn into pity, or it'll just slip back into cynicism. Wisdom shows us how to practice compassion in the real world that we have. So I'd like to approach this by giving you at least 5 possible obstacles or hindrances that we would mention, I'm sure, think of, or see for ourselves the moment we try to be compassionate. Now, the obstacles that we encounter may be in other people or in circumstances, but the biggest obstacles are actually in ourselves. We would all like to receive compassion, but how do we actually give compassion to others? You know, there's something odd about demanding compassion from others, and especially odd about demanding compassion from others if one is not showing compassion oneself. See, compassion isn't a word, it's an idea, it's actually doing something. It's a relationship between you and everyone else. Okay, that's what it is. So, what sorts of things get in the way? Well, let's get down to basics here when we are going to start actually practicing compassion. The first is encountering our own impatience. Impatience is the first obstacle. So I'm always, you know, going somewhere, doing something, and I don't really want things getting in the way. So in other words, I'm living in the future, so I want to be somewhere over there, but I'm not yet, so I'm impatient about being there. Now, with that in my mind, it's very difficult to be compassionate, because other people, I think, will be getting in my way. And do I really want to spend time or effort being with the suffering or unhappiness or dread of another person? It's just getting in the way, isn't it? Now, to give a very simple illustration, which you may have heard from me before, where you get to that till in Tesco's and there's a little old lady about 85 years of age who's just opening her purse. She's just in front of you in the queue, and then she starts, she's lonely, so she starts chatting to the cashier about all sorts of things. You want to go somewhere. You want to get in your car with your shopping and go. And here's this little old lady, and then she starts bringing out all her coins. She's going to pay £6.85. And she starts bringing out the coins, and then 2 or 3 fall on the floor. And you're thinking, oh my gosh. Have we all experienced that kind of thing? Now, do you see why I say obstacle to compassion? Part of me is saying, perhaps it's not, but perhaps it's saying, this is an elderly person. I'm going to be there one day, unless I get hit by a bus or something else, because none of us know when we're going to go, really. But I may get to her condition. I may be just like her one day, and there may be somebody behind me who doesn't understand my loneliness, doesn't understand that I can't actually calculate easily in my head anymore. Now I'm, you see, the compassion is in my head, but what am I going to actually do for that person? Well, this is where the wisdom comes in, because wisdom requires understanding. It requires some thought, it requires some negotiation, it requires identifying with another person, it requires actually doing something. So perhaps I could engage her with maybe I could help her in some way. Maybe I could pay for it and then say, well, just let me have the money outside and get this queue moving. Oh, did you see what now I'm thinking? Now I'm applying wisdom because I've identified with her problem. If she sees it as a problem, she may not, of course. But I've identified with what's going on, so now I'm engaging with it, and it's starting to move forward. But now this is making a difference to me, because what is happening is I'm just becoming that little bit more selfless. The selfish, self-centered part of me was, why don't you just get out of my way? I want to get in the car with the shopping, and now you're fiddling about with this person. You go on chatting about all sorts of things about your garden and your dahlias, move. We know that that's not very compassionate. Actually, it's callous. But there's a little bit of callousness in all of us. So, negotiate, engage. Okay, the next one is a kind of, I suppose it's kind of a mood of irritation. Many of us, especially in the sort of society we are in now, we are overloaded with stimuli, we are overloaded with demands, we are overloaded with offers of entertainment, things to go and buy, information overload, demand overload. It's irritating. We are anxious. We are wound up nearly all the time. And we've learned to kind of live with that, so we don't really notice it. It's only if you go on something like a retreat and you stop that you realize, wow, I was so wound up. But I didn't know I was wound up because I've kind of learned to live with it. But that is actually making demands on me, if you like, on my heart and mind. It's not a happy place to be. It's an obstacle. Because you see, if I experience irritation, anger, anxiety, tension, am I in any kind of place to be compassionate with others? Because I'm concerned with myself. So we're kind of, we're wanting more, we're frustrated, we're angry, we're irritated, we're wound up, we're tense. At a fairly low level. I don't mean we're about to explode, although that happens too. And then we want to dull that irritation, that anxiety, with medications, with drugs, with alcohol, with partying, whatever it is. That's very short-lived, so that doesn't work very well either. But you see, in this state, you may as well forget about compassion for others. Now, the arithmetic doesn't add up here. I would like to receive compassion, but I'm not giving any, because I'm not in a state to. If everybody is like that, nobody's going to get any compassion, which makes our condition even worse. Because then not only am I anxious, tense, and so on, but nobody seems to care about me, you see. And that's a trap that we all fall into. We forget that we are a human family, and the best way forward is actually to help each other and to be with each other. We just seem to forget that elementary lesson. So that's the second obstacle. Now, can that be overcome? So think about it. What's the way of engaging with that and working a way through that? A third obstacle to practicing compassion is what you might call alienation. Alienation is where you just don't identify with the other person or creature because it's not like you. Now, there's a whole range of things there. Men don't identify with women, women don't identify with men, white don't identify with black, black don't identify with white, Asians don't identify with Europeans, Europeans don't identify with Asians, and then one nation doesn't identify with another. I'm a Ukrainian, you're a Russian, or you belong to this religion, I belong to a different religion, or I belong to this branch of this religion, I'm a Shia, and you belong to another branch called Sunni. So, we are not identifying, we can't identify in those circumstances. We have put up barriers. Where are those barriers? Where do they actually exist? They exist up here. They're in our minds and in our emotional life. So we put up those barriers, and then you can't really feel compassion for someone on the other side of the barrier. It's like, these people count, but those don't. Now, we do that in all sorts of little ways, and we do it in very big ways. But there's a lot of that going on, and again, it's a natural inclination of we human beings, and there isn't one of us here, including myself, that it doesn't tend to do that from time to time. They put one group of people over there, and then there's my group. So it's my family. They get compassion. Next door neighbours, I'm not so sure about that. Or somebody from another country or whatever, not so sure about that. Somebody who speaks a language I don't understand, I'm not so sure about that. Maybe I'm uncertain, maybe I'm a little bit afraid. But we need to recognise that that's how we are, and that if we can't give compassion because of barriers, then we won't receive compassion because of barriers. When I go to another country, I'm the alien. Then I may not be receiving the compassion. Again, it's a question for us, then, isn't it? Where does the wisdom come in eroding, dissolving such barriers? We really need to do this in the globalized world that we live in now, with all its really deep problems. Otherwise, we're heading towards hell. Again, this connects with the idea of selflessness. The biggest barrier is self. I'm in here, you're all out there. So I'm the one that really counts. Well, doesn't really make sense if you think about it. What, 7 billion of us? Or each one the center of the world? I don't think so. We pop up and we go away. That happens to all of us. So we need, again, to subdue this sense of self, you see, and that's where these barriers are all about protecting and consolidating and strengthening the self. Dissolve those barriers, and you'll feel much more at peace with everybody. Even barriers between us and other creatures. A spider comes into the house, everyone seems to go hysterical and wants a stamp on it. It's amazing how hysterical people will get about one slug on the footpath or one snail on the lettuce. Well, we actually share a good bit of our DNA with this. Even a housefly has got about, I think, 30% of our DNA. We're all related, believe it or not. Why this, kill, kill, kill? We need to let go of this tendency that we have to alienate. Next is 4. I don't know what to call this. You might, and it's a difficult one to talk about. It's something like incapacity. Do we all have the same capacity, our native capacity for compassion? I think if we are realistic, and it may not be very politically correct to say so, but I think the answer is no. That at one extreme, there are people, for whatever one reason or other, are very insensitive and have very little insight into themselves and are just not, if you like, by nature, I hesitate to say it, but perhaps by nature, not very given to compassion. On the other end of the scale, you've got people that get it immediately and just are very caring, self-sacrificing individuals. Now, whether that's, you say, that's genes or upbringing or experience of life, I don't really know. It'd probably be a mixture of all of those. You see, we can't pretend in real life, in which we actually try to practice compassion, we can't pretend that everybody is on exactly the same level when it comes to emotional intelligence. But what difference does it make to whether you're going to practice compassion or not? If you encounter a person that's insensitive, callous, doesn't seem to care, to use a term from psychopathology, maybe they're a sociopath. There's just something missing, you might say, so that they can't identify with others. Now, are we going to alienate? They're not human, we could say, couldn't we? Or do we now find a way of, again, of acknowledging, accepting, working around, working with, not trying to change somebody that can't be changed, etc., and knowing the difference between what can be changed and what can't be changed? It's a difficult one, isn't it? But you see, that's the reality of compassion. We can talk about the ideal of it, and it just becomes more waffle. How do we do it? It's a challenge. This is living Dharma. Living Dharma is actually every day in the people you encounter, making that contribution from the point of view of deeper understanding than you previously had. Finally, something that is quite common in our society, not so common in some other societies I've lived in, and again, I'm not sure what the right word for it, but I would call it hostile defensiveness. Well, it's like we're all a bit afraid of each other. We're afraid of risk. We think that other people potentially could hurt me. Therefore, I go into a kind of hostility. I tend to shut down, but not only that, I could tend to be more aggressive than I would really want to be, simply because I feel the need to assert myself, because I'm working on the assumption that other people will take advantage of me if they can. So imagine a situation in which you've got a youngster who's, from his early years, perhaps been psychologically or verbally abused a lot by parents, for one reason or another gets bullied in the playground. Now, one way a lot of us would go in that situation is to learn to be a bully. That is, I'm not going to survive unless I am aggressive. I need to be aggressive. Not because it's in my heart to be aggressive, but because I have to survive. I have to defend myself. So one little life strategy that a lot of us have, not everyone of course, I'm talking about a particular character trait, is a kind of hostile defensiveness, or if you call it passive aggression, in which you can see that this person, like if they had a life choice, they wouldn't go that way, but they've learned to go that way in order to survive. So you become an adult, you go to work, and then you're aggressive with because in your mind you're still in the school playground. You still could get bullied. So you're aggressive. You're a fighting spirit. I've adopted a whole attitude or posture of fighting. Any little thing will set you off. Can you expect a lot of compassion from that person having adopted that little life strategy? having suffered bullying, etc., they're going to fight back at the smallest little, they're set off by the smallest thing, because they always interpret whatever you're saying or doing as a potential threat. So they're not in a position to feel compassion for other people. It might be anybody, it might be members of your family we're talking about here, it might be you to some extent, it might be me to some extent. It might be your colleagues. And it's a challenge for us because we are lay people. Lay meaning we are not monks or nuns. We haven't withdrawn from the world and living by, over 200 rules. We are living as soon as you leave this room, today, you're with quite nice people, because we understand what we're trying to do. But as soon as you go out there, the situation changes again. You're going to meet alienation, you're going to meet hostile defensiveness, you're going to meet frustration. And then that's going to spark off the same sort of reactions in yourself. So now over to you. I mean, what are the wise approaches in any of these? What can you do to not to slip into cynicism? Because it's an understandable reaction to say, look, the world is messed up, people are screwed up, it's a battleground out there, I'm just going to live in my little bubble. When you add up all those bubbles, it doesn't actually work anyway. 7 billion people living in bubbles doesn't work. That's not a society. That's a collection of bubbles.
In my work with young people, I think one of the most practical things that you need to try and have is patience, because very often when you're trying to be compassionate with people who you might not know very well, in actual fact, their immediate reaction is one of slight suspicion. It's like,
what do you want? Yeah, what do you want from me? Yeah.
You don't really mean that, yeah. or where's the payback for you on this sort of thing? Whereas, you are only genuine offering compassion, but you haven't built up a sufficient relationship for it to be received. So you need to be perhaps patient, but actually persistent. You've got to keep the people who reject your compassion. You've got to keep going back with it. So there's more of an understanding of where it's coming from, if you like.
I think that we probably, in following this path and maybe beginning to change, you will encounter the challenge of people that don't understand what is happening to you, so that they, for example, they will interpret kindness as weakness. Now, if you're raising that really, so that is what I mean in the real world. Now, how are you going to send messages or show through your actions that I'm not weak? I'm kind but strong, you see, because the first step, full step that people make is, very kind, soft touch.
I remember my father saying to me about just have a little go at many small little acts. I saw a paper boy recently, and I was out running in the morning, and I saw a £5 note, and it was sort of blowing in the wind, and it was raining a bit, and this paper boy looked a bit depressed, and I picked it up, and I went up to him and I said, "This is yours." He said, "Oh, I don't think it is." And I folded it up and I put it in his top pocket, and I said, "But it is today." And he went, "Well, thanks very much, mate." Because it doesn't matter whose fibre it was. There was no one on the street. There was me, there was him, and for a moment, from what my father told me, there was a small little act. But in contrast to that, on my way here this morning, I was running a bit late. There was a learner driver in front of me on the A3. And my eyes opened and adrenaline started to leak into my system, and I thought, you'll never get it completely right. You've got to start somewhere. So I think the tiny little acts is something we are all capable of doing. You're not going to change the world, but you could change someone by just sharing a smile in a moment, couldn't you?
New Buddha way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.